Heinig in memory of his sister Chava Bas Rav Simcha ben Yamin, his brother Tzvi Aaron ben Zev ben Harav Simcha ben Yamin, and his father Harav Simcha ben Yamin ben Rav Yosef Yitzchak, and Malki's mother Sosha Bas Koina.
Can we get
Be Pizer in memory of her sister Rita Greenberg. A week of learning, the family of Danny Shepiltovsky in memory of Daniel Ben Aaron David, Marcia Fried and her family in memory of Milton. Today is the 23rd. There are no days of learning. Okay, when last we met.
Any chance we can get a picture?
Oh, you know what I look like. I don't know how to work this thing. You have sound, be satisfied. All right, so when last we met, we discussed if you plant onions from last year and they now multiply tenfold, you have to true and masters on the first planted stuff from
The sound is not solid.
What?
Your sound signal is not flowing. It's not solid.
I don't know how to do this. Somebody else did it, complain to them. It's quarter already.
Isn't Erwin or Bob Bromberg there to help you?
Oh, we're back.
Sounds better.
Kenny, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you better.
Unable to access camera. Wait a minute, I can push this button. Unable to access camera. All right. So we're assuming, therefore, that even though the halacha of Trumas and Maestros.
Now we lost sound. Just surprised either Bob Bromberg or Erwin know how to operate it.
Then you have to then take the calyxes off the seeds, and then you have to heap up the wheat, and then you have to smooth the pile, and then and only then do you have to take Trumas and Maestros. So it's not just the ground; it's both things. Okay. Amrei, the rabbis answered over here, Meiser Digun Hadakagirim Le. You have to do this whole process and turn the produce into Dagon, which means completed harvest process, before you have to take Trumas and Maestros. Okay, now now we have, just to put us into a context, we have successfully defended Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yonason. Okay? So therefore, you had 2-1, and the guy can't eat that Shemitah onion that he planted again in the 8th year. Okay, that's where we're holding. But that was the psak of Rav Yanai. So now we've upheld the 2. So we could have stopped here and said 2-1. We go like the 2, but we're not going to do that. We're going to challenge the opinion of the 1 and show he's not right. So it's a default position of the two, even if it were only one. Okay? Mesiv Rami Bar Chama, he challenges Rav Yanai based on the text of our Mishnah. Okay? Kainem Peres Ha'elu Alai. I make this basket of fruit, figs, whatever, as if they're a korban in my life. So just as I cannot eat a korban, I cannot eat those fruits. They take on like a quasi kedusha. I can't eat them. Okay, or I say kainem hemopi, or they're kainem on my mouth, or kainem hem lipi, or they're kainem to my mouth. These are all similar lashonas that have the same effect. We learned this earlier. Aser b'chilufeihen ubigeduleihen. If I swap one of those figs for a date, a fruit date, I would not allow to eat the date either. If I take the seeds out of that fig and I plant a fig tree, assuming I live long enough, I would not be able to eat the figs that grow from the fig tree that grew from those seeds that came from that fruit, which was kainem to me. Okay? Shani Eichel, V'Sha'ani Toem, and it's either Sha'ani or Sha'ani, depending on the girsa you like. If my neder was narrower, and I simply said, I won't eat these figs, right? So then muter b'chilufeihen ubigeduleihen, I would be able to eat the date that I swapped for a fig, or I would be able to eat the next generation of figs.
First he's saying I don't want to have any anah from it.
Correct. The first that it's kainem to me. So the halacha is exactly, that's why I said it's quasi kodshim. If you have a female sheep and you decide you're going to use that female sheep as a korban, okay, you make it a hekdesh. And then it gets pregnant and has a baby, or it was pregnant and it has a baby. The baby is kodesh also. So we follow the same pattern. And if you were to make a tamura, then in other words, you would swap that sheep for a different sheep. That would also be, so the pattern is identical to the pattern of kodshim. That's when you use the word kainem, that's what you're making it quasi kodshim. That's the best way to really understand it, okay? Now, remember, we also discussed that there are, at this point in time, two basic ways of planting plants. There are actually four, but we'll stick with two. Some plants, you plant the seed. In the process of growing, the new plant consumes the nutrients from the seed disintegrates. Other things like alliums, you plant the bulb and the bulb branches off into new bulbs, and the original bulb can remain. Your wife has a drawer with onions in it. Sometimes the onions have shoots, but the onion isn't ruined. You just cut the shoot off. Some people dig out the green in the middle, but the point is that you could grow 100 onions from one onion, and the one onion could still be there. Okay, so davar shizaroa kale, those kinds of plants where the seed disintegrates or is destroyed in the process of generating the new plant. That is what we were talking about when we said, if I said eating, I could swap it out. Aval davar she'ein zaro kala, if it's something where the seed does not disappear, like the onion, then afilu gedule gedulin asurin, even multiple generations, not just that first generation, but 5 generations later, if that onion was usser, then all of its progeny are also usser. Okay, so that's what this brisa says. So then, of course, you wouldn't be able to eat that onion. It was a shemitah.
Only when it disappears.
Only when it disappears. So figs were a good example, because the little fig seeds won't be there when the big fig, from a little acorn, a giant oak tree grows, but the acorn is gone. On the onion, on the other hand, like you have tulips. You at the end of the growing season, you dig the bulb out. The bulb is still there. Okay. So therefore we now have a challenge to Rav Yanai, who said you could eat that onion. Okay, the replanted truma onion. Omer Rav Abba, shiny kanamus. Well, maybe koinem vows are different. Why? What is one of your options if you make a vow?
You get it answered.
You can go to a chacham or go to a beis din and be matir your neder. So that's an option you have. Hoel the boy mishil alehu. He could cancel the vow by talking to a chacham. Havelahu kedaver sheyesh lo matirin. Yesterday we talked about sheyesh lo matirin and she'ein lo matirin. So it turns out that vows are davar sheyesh lo matirin. I can cancel the vow, and I could therefore take the kedusha off of that basket of figs. Okay, so we know that if it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, then there's no bitul, right? You just wait it out or do what you have to do to rectify it. But if it falls into something else, it's not batul in any measure at all. Havalahu kedavar sheyesh lo matirin ve'ein batul barod. So it winds up these figs. It does, or the onion. It doesn't matter what happens with the growth method. Since you could undo the neder, they never can take. Unless you do so, they remain usher. So hare truma. But let's take the case of truma. The boy mitchil Allah. I hinted to this, I think 2 days ago, no, yesterday. If you have truma, you've taken truma, and then you realize the only Kohen within shouting distance is a Kohen you really rather have nothing to do with. But in a couple of days, you may be able to have some visiting Kahanim. So you are allowed to go to a chacham and say, Mel is the only Kohen around, and I don't want to give the truma to Mel. So I want to dump it back in the tree. And then when Sid comes down, I'll redo my trumas and maestras. You're allowed to do that. Oh, bit.
Why can't he hold on to it for a couple of
Hey.
days? I wouldn't take it for the minute.
He wants to be, I don't know, he wants to dump it back. The why is not significant here. It's the ability, even with truma, to undo it. So we said earlier, truma is a davar she'ein lo matirin. You can't undo it. It's always truma. And in fact, if you plant it, everything that grows is also truma. And if you plant those seeds, they're also truma. But we're now telling you that truma is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, so you can't. Okay, but nonetheless, we learned that truma has a ratio of 201. In other words, 200 non-truma can overwhelm 100 non-truma. Client. 100 non-truma can overwhelm one truma. So it doesn't fit the rule. The rule was davar she'ein lo matirin can be batul. A davar sheyesh lo matirin cannot be batul. Okay? So that doesn't fit the rule. The Tanan can prove that. Say a truma tameya. What if you have a bucket full of grain that's truma, and it becomes tame? So now nobody Kohen can eat it. Shenafla lapachos mimeya. It falls into a larger container of truma, but the ratio does not reach 101 to 100. Okay, so what happens now? Or, chulin, I apologize. It fell into a chulin. So, takor terakev, the only option you have is to set it aside and let it rot. Because now the whole thing is like truma tameya, which cannot be used, and there's no way of undoing it. So you're stuck. Okay? So lameya ta'ala. So the implication, since the Mishnah said less than 100, the implication is 100 or more, it would be batul, and the whole thing would become chulin. So we see that truma can be mavatel, even though we just figured out that it's a davar yesh lo matirin. So apparently truma doesn't fit the rules. So the Gemara answers, yeah, but you're not looking at the whole picture. Amre v'truma biyad kohen astina. It's true. If I took my truma and then realized I have no kohen to give it to, I can ask Chacham to let me dump it back and deal with it when I can find a kohen. But if I've already given it to Mel, then it's truma and there's no undoing it. There's no other options. So it's a davar she'ein lo matirin. Okay? The lo motzi machilale. After it's in the hands of the kohen, it's a done deal. And you cannot undo it. You can't talk to a chacham. There's no outs. Okay, so you were talking about this little narrow window of a possibility, a theoretical possibility of dumping it back. But what if the kohen's already got it? Okay, so that but there's a new problem we've just created. If we're talking about it already went to a kohen, a sefer, let's look at the rest of that Mishnah. Im hoysata hayra to mocher lekohen. Again, I have one seya of truma, but this time it's tahor. And it falls into 87 parts of grain that are chulin. So it's less than 1 in 100. So now the whole thing becomes truma. And my only out is to find a kohen who'll buy it, even though he'll only probably pay a discount rate. Because he knows, Mel knows he's the only guy around who can buy it because he's going to chop it before Sid gets here. And they don't have a dispute over what they would pay. So therefore, the tzeifa indicates what? That it is still in the hands of the farmer. Because it says if the truma falls into other grain, sell the mixture to a Kohen. So how can you tell me that it's already in the hands of the Kohen? That can't be, because normally the Reish and the Seifa, at least the set of facts are the same, except for the chain fact of Tameh and Tahar. Okay, Ella, so what we have to be talking about is a very weird special case. Yisroel shenaflu lo mi beis avi imoy kohen askina. Mrs. Schwartz's father is a Kohen. Okay, Mrs. Schwartz's son. Now, the Mrs. Schwartz's husband is dead, so he's not her heir. Her only living relatives are her father and her son. Okay? And she dies. So now the father's only living relative, the Kohen, his only living relative is this grandson who's a Yisroel. And he dies. So now the grandson inherits the grandfather's estate, including whatever truma happened to be in the hands of the Kohen before he died. So now this it was in the hands of a Kohen, so it can't be nullified. It was transferred legitimately to a Yisroel. The Yisroel inherited it. And the Yisrael can't eat the mixture because it's not buttal. It wasn't. It's 1 in 87 in the example I gave, not 1 in 100. So this kid who inherited this truma has no option but to find an unrelated Kohen, because there are no relatives, otherwise they'd have inherited, and to sell them the truma. So that might be a resolution, except it doesn't work. Vaha Katani Seifa, because at the end of the mixture that we left out before a significant factor. V'timocher lekohen chutz midame oiso seya. When the Mishnah talks about if the truma falls into an inadequate amount of chulin to be mavatal it, so you weigh the mixture. With my keep to my 87. Now there are 88 seya, and the stuff is $1 a seya, so he can't sell it for $88. He has to sell it for $87. He can't make money from the seya of truma. That okay? That's what the Mishnah says. What?
The order of the inheritance, if the Kohen is less of a person to inherit than the son who isn't a Kohen.
The only heir is the non-Kohen.
Right. But if there's a Kohen there also.
If he has a brother, I don't understand your question yet.
There's an order of inheritance, right?
Correct.
Okay. If this fellow who is not a Kohen, does he get it before the Kohen?
No. The only way the man's daughter can inherit, he's not directly inheriting. He's inheriting because his mother stood to inherit. So you have to say, if his mother stands to inherit, he has no sons. Okay, because if he had sons, they'd inherit and they're kahan. And also, he apparently has no other collateral. He doesn't have a brother because his dead daughter is inheriting. Okay, because she has an heir. So, all right, the point is it's now a very special case, and it doesn't apply in normal circumstances. So what we have to say now is a whole new concept that 60 pages into Nidorim, we're going to learn an incredible new fact that we have to rethink everything we've learned heretofore. Ella Ema, what we have to say is Bishlema Konamos Mitzvah Litish Ule Alehen. Whenever you make a neder, a koinim type neder, or a shavua, it's a mitzvah to go ask a rabbi to please let you off the hook. Okay? We would think we had the pasuk that says you got to keep your word. But now we're saying it's a mitzvah to, if possible, undo the neder. Okay? Bishleima kanamos mitzvah litish ule aleihen. Mishum. The Rabbi Nassan, because Rabbi Nassan gives a klal. It's mamish a klal gadol. The Reb Nassan, he teaches us. Kol hanayder ki'ilu bana bama. It's a bad thing to make a neder. And he makes an analogy that making a neder is like building a private.
Using konam language.
I said a kind named neder. It says kanamos. Making this neder is like building an altar in your backyard, which once upon a time was allowed, but isn't since the first Beis Hamikdash. Okay? And worse than that, Hamakaimo, if you make a neder and then keep what you said in the neder, in other words, you makayim your neder, ke'ilu maktir alecha. It's like you brought an illegal sacrifice on the illegal altar. So it's a very bad thing. Now, since now we see it's a mitzvah to undo the koinem neder, it becomes a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay, so truma my mitzvah lehis shulei. So I understand we said earlier there is some circumstance you haven't yet given it to a Kohen. You have a valid reason not to give it to a Kohen that's around. You talk to the rabbi, he lets you off the hook. You can dump it back in. Okay? But there's no mitzvah to do that. Truma my mitzvah lishtulei Allah. That's not a mitzvah. First of all, you shouldn't dislike the one Kohen and not want to give it to him. And secondly, if I make a neder not to eat these grapes, so I can undo that, they're kohen to me. So I can undo that and I can eat the grapes. But the bottom line is, whether I undo the truma, I have to make it do it again. There's no net gain to me by undoing that, and you can't say it's a mitzvah. I haven't improved anything by doing that. At the best, it's the same. So there's no mitzvah involved. Okay? So we can't put truma in that category. So we're going to go back and look at our onions again. Okay, one last look at our onions.
What does it say, Lo Yachil Devaro?
In a pasuk.
It talks about
it talks about nidorim. The pasuk says if you neder a neder, and it is a double lashon, or you make or you shavua, again it talks a double lashon. You have to do it, and you can't violate your word. So, for example, you know it's Yom Kippur night, and everybody's yelling out pledges, and you say, "Oh, I'll give $1,000." You're stuck. You have to give it. To the extent the shul could take it in Torah to make you give it, a neder obligates you.
How much time do you have for that?
3 holidays. Okay, there's machlokes of where you start counting. But I said this before. When you say to your wife, "I'll take out the garbage, stop hocking me," That's a neder. You now have to take out the garbage. When you say to your friend, I know we haven't gotten together, but I promise you, we'll have lunch tomorrow. That's a neder. You have to do it. We don't realize that we make nedorim 4, 5, 20 times a day because we speak loosely and we make commitments to do things. They are obligations we've taken upon ourselves. And if you can't meet that guy for lunch, you have to go to a bezdin and undo your commitment or to a chacham. You have to keep saying bli neder, correct. Say bli neder at the end of every sentence and you're in good shape. All right. So now we're going back and talking about the onions. No, we're going to do it. Gufa. Omer Reb Yochanan. Reb Yochanan made the following statement, okay? Litra b'tzalim shetikna zara'ah, a basket of onions. That you actually did take your trumas and maestras from them. And then you replanted them, okay? Mis aseres lefikula. So you planted, let's say this liter has 30 onions in it. And let's say you now have an onion patch of 300 onions. So you could argue, since the first 30 had trumas and maestras taken, when I harvest the whole shebang, I only have to take trumas and maestras on the 270 that are extras. But that's not true. Mas aseres lefikula. You have to take trumas and maestras on the whole 300. So what happened to the trumas and maestras of the first batch? Yasiv Rava v'kamer lahashmaita. Rava was sitting with someone. It turns out to be Rav Chisda. And he repeated this over, that if you plant onions and the new onions grow, you have to take trumas and maestras on the whole shebang. Omer le Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda says back to him, Ma tatzis lach. Will anybody listen to that? That's ridiculous. Ula Rav Yochanan Rabcha, and they won't listen to the rabbi that taught you that either. Okay. Those first 30 onions were rectified, is an English word they sometimes use. They took trumas and maestras from them. They're now edible. You can do whatever you want with them. What happened to the heter of being able to eat those just because you planted them again? Where did that heter disappear to? Amalei milotanan kavasa. So Rabbah replies to Rav Chisda, we saw the exact same thing in a Mishnah. Vitzalim sheyardu aleihim geshamim vitzimchu. We saw this, I think, 2 days ago. That if you harvest 6th year onions, and you do whatever you have to do to them, but you do not have a root cellar. So you decide to bury them in a sandbox as a way of preserving them. You're not talking about planting them. You're simply preserving them for the winter. But it rained on the sandbox, got wet, and the onions sprouted. It's imchu. Green shoots came out of the onions. We learned all this earlier. Im hoya alen shelahem shechayrin asurin. If the shoots had been there long enough for the greens to be dark green, or according to another view that you could grab the greens and yank the onion out of the ground by them, they're sturdy enough, then it's considered significant new growth. And at this point, we're going to say the onion is usher. Okay? Horico, but if they're only little yellowy, tender, almost sort of yellow-green shoots that are just short and tender, and if you grab by them, it would break off, it wouldn't yank the onion out of the ground. Mutarin, then the onion again. At this point, we're applying the heter, the onions are mutter. Okay? So again, I ask, Lama heter shebehen hasin hala. If the greens are dark or strong enough, then the onion, as we've been reading it, is usser. What happened to the heter of the onion? It was a 6th-year onion. We took Trumas and Maestras. All of a sudden, it's disappeared. So your case, Rav Chisda, if you had been paying attention in Shir, you'd have learned 2 days ago that that's exact same case. So Omerle, Rav Chisda answers. Now, you have the whole cup because Rav Chisda is going back and rereading the Mishnah and translating it differently. Mi savat al iker katani. Do you think that Mishnah is talking about the onion bulb is mutter or usser? No. Atofsefes katani asurin. No, he's saying if you cut those shoots off, if they're dark green, those shoots are usser because they grew during Shemitah year. And if they're tender and you cut them off, you can eat them because they're not significant. They're just simply considered part of the 6th-year onion. So he learns the Mishnah totally differently, and therefore he can challenge Rabbi Yochanan in the previous memra. Okay, everybody got that? Okay. So, however, Rava is not satisfied. Ihachi, says Rava, my asa Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Meimar. Okay. If a brisa is word for word identical with the Mishnah, the brisa is usually of no account because the Mishnah is more authoritative than a brisa, and they're exactly the same thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to show from a brisa that this interpretation of Rav Chisda of the Mishnah is untenable. Okay? Why did Reb Shimon Gamaliel come along and argue with the Mishnah by putting the words in a brisa, Tisanya in a brisa? Reb Shimon ben Gamaliel Aimer, Hagoydel b'chiyuv chayav, whatever grows under an obligation extends that obligation. Hagadel b'potter, potter. Whatever grows without any chiyuv on it remains without a chiyuv on it. So Tanakame nami hacha amar. According to you, that's exactly what the Tanakama just said. If they're tender little yellow shoots, you can eat them. If they're dark shoots, you can't eat them. So now Reb Shimon is exactly the same as the Tanakama. So therefore, your interpretation of the Mishnah doesn't fly. So Reb Chisda says, no. The Mishnah, Tanakama of the Mishnah is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Kula masnis and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel kataniwa. The whole shebang is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So my interpretation is exactly right. Okay? Now, the Ad Khan, up till now, lo shamat leila Reb Shimon ben Gamliel de lo kotorah. What we're talking about till now, the implication is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel would say that the new shoot, when it's tender and young, does not turn the old onion into an usser onion because it's now growing in the 7th year, is where there was no real work involved. What the
Okay,
guy did not dig up a furrow in the field and stick the onion and carefully the right depth and all that stuff. All he did was throw them in the sandbox and put sand over them. But if he did make an effort, then indeed it would be bottled to the new growth. So if this 6th-year onion produces 10 7th-year onions, you would have 11 7th-year onions. It would be bottled to the group and therefore not edible. Okay.
He puts effort into it.
Yeah. That's, meaning he really planted it. Okay. He didn't just try to store it. He really meant to plant it, which goes all the way back to that guy Yishmael, who wanted to plant the what about this 7th-year onion that I really did plant? Okay. Anything where you actually went to the effort of replanting it would be nullified in the totality of the new growth. Vahare litra maisa tevo de katarach. But let's talk about the case we learned earlier, where I took trumas and maestras from a basket of onions, and then I went to the effort of planting them. V'katani isa litra meiser alav b'makam acher lefi cheshbon. The bottom of the previous blot. That what we have to do is estimate how many onions there were and take trumas and maestras, not from the whole group, but from another basket of onions that I happen to have in my storeroom. Okay, so we now see that if you haven't taken trumas and maestras, or just meiser or meiser truma, any of the rectification processes have not been performed, and the produce is replanted, you still owe those trumas and maestras. You don't have to dig them up and do it. You could take it from another source, but the obligation doesn't disappear. And now we have a new issue about if you've taken trumas and maestras from the 10, what about the 90? Do they need to have trumas and maestras, or are they extensions of the front? Okay. So Shani Gabi Meiser. No, because Meiser is different. And we're going to cite the Meiser pasuk. Now, normally we went, Kara Aser Taser. The pasuk on Meiser has a double lashon. Usually it's translated, you shall surely tithe, or tithe you shall tithe. And the normal drasha on that is aser to asher, shin sin. If you do your trumas and meisters properly, God will reward you by making you wealthy. But now we're doing a different drasha. Aser taser, tithe you shall tithe, which teaches us there are occasions where even though you've already tithed, you may have to tithe again. That's the new drasha, okay? V'hetera zare inshe. So only permitted produce. All right, the normal process. Harry the farmer sprinkles a seah of wheat on his field. At the end of the growing season, he harvested and he has 100 seah of wheat. So what he does is he takes trumas and maestras, and now he's left with approximately 89 seahs of wheat. He separates out 1 seah to replant next year and sells 88 seah of wheat. That's how he earns a living. So the normal process is planting seeds that have already had trumas and maasros taken from them. Asura lo zara inche. Normal human beings do not plant seeds that haven't had trumas and maasros taken from them, and therefore they're usher. Okay? So Gufa, let's look at another side of it. Omer Rav Chanina Tir To'o, with his fellow's name is Rabbi Chanina Tir To'o, or he's from a place called Tir To'o. Omer Rabbi Yanai, we're quoting Rabbi Yanai again. Batsel shel truma shenoto. We planted a truma dika onion. Varabo gedula val ikora, and the new onions that develop overwhelm numerically the original onion. Mutter. Everything, the new onions and the truma dika onion, become chulin. That's Rav Yanai. Lememra, the gedule, and we'll just go to the end of the parak. Heter ma'alen esa iser. So if you're going to tell me that, then you're telling me that the new onions cancel out the truma kite of the first onion. Vahasanan, but we learn elsewhere in the Mishnah, gedule truma. If I plant a truma onion and it produces 1 million new onions, they're all 1,000,001 onions are truma. So the gedulin kamrinan, and Reb Yanai, we're going to modify. We're going to say not the first generation. I'm defining generation. We put a truma onion in the ground. It produces a bunch of new onions. That's first generation onions, and they're all truma. So Rabbi Yanai says, yeah, but if I take not the first onion, but one of the new onions, and I produce a second generation onion, those are no longer truma, they are chulin. V'hanami tanina, and we learned this concept in another Mishnah, gedule gedulin chulin. Second generation produce from a truma source are chulin. Yeah, but if that's a Mishnah, so what is the new? If you modify Rabbi Yanai to be second generation, and then you dig up a Mishnah that shows second generation, what was the point of Rabbi Yanai's statement? Okay, what is he teaching us? So we have to find a chidush in Rabbi Yanai. Ha komash malon. Here's the chiddush. She'en zaru kala. If you're talking about wheat seeds that disappear in the growing process, so obviously the first generation are truma because they came from truma, but the second generation did not come from truma. The truma seed's gone. So the second generation can be chulin. Rabbi Yanai's chiddush is that even an onion which is still there after it generates new onions, even in that. So I could say, but the original onion is still generating. It's not truly second generation. Rabbi Yanai comes and says, no, nonetheless, they're all chulin.
But from a seed, you don't get a second generation.
Yes, you do. You take that seed, you plant a plant. Now that plant generates a seed, and you plant that seed. So that's it. No, it's a progeny of the first seed. If I have a kid.
But using the same onion is not the same as taking another seed.
That's what Rabbi Yanai's chiddush is.
All right.
That even with regard to onions, the second generation rule works.
That's what he ruled.
That's Rabbi Yanai's chiddush. Okay? V'hatnan, but we have the following rule in a Mishnah. Hatevel gedul of mutarin. If I plant tevel, we had before, you're supposed to take trumas and maasros first. But if I go ahead and plant tevel, gedulin mitorin bedavar shezaro kala, if the tevel seeds disappear in the process of producing the new wheat plants, then the tevel kite is gone when the seeds are gone. Okay, and the produce is usable. Avo, davar she'ein zaro kala. But if the original plant that generated all these new plants is still there, gedule gedula nasurin, even multiple generations later are still usher. So, riboy de riboy gedulin al ikoro muter kamash. What Rabbi Yanai is saying, that in a circumstance where the new growth it's not 1-on-1, it's 100-to-1 or 48-to-1, whatever it is. So then it's eventually you reach a point where the old onion is utterly insignificant in regard to this huge new fancy onion patch you have. Okay, and the multiple generations later are mutter, and we have completed the perek hadran Allah haneider min hayerek, and everybody have a good Erev Shabbos and a good Shabbos, and in Yirtz Hashem, Mrs. Green will publicly push her husband around, and he'll be here tomorrow to give this year.
No, not tomorrow, Sunday.
Shabbos.
I believe that David Cheslow has agreed to do.
Let him talk. Could I hear him? Yeah.
I believe that David Cheslow has
Oh,
agreed to do
okay.
tomorrow's.
He's not. All right. Now, what about Sunday?
Sunday, God willing, I will let you know for sure, but I hope to be.
Motzei Shabbos. Okay, I do Rebbeinu
Why
Tam.
do I have trouble?
Okay, goodbye. That's yours?
Thank you.
Is there a auto repair shop that people use that's recommended?
Speaker is on.
Is this my phone?
Yeah.
No, this isn't my phone.
I don't repair my car. I get a new one.
Okay, this is not my phone.
That's not your phone. Whose phone is it?
I don't know. Where is my phone?
That's Erwin.
How do I know where your phone is?
Erwin Keller's phone. I think.
Hey.
Next to Tanya
Are you using my phone? No. Where's my phone?
That's your phone. Is that your phone?
No, this is not my phone.
Hey, where's Bob?
What's wrong with your car?
That's not my phone.
Nothing wrong mechanically.
Bob.
The window is stuck, doesn't go down. And if it rains, I'll have a mop on my car.
You mean it doesn't go up?
Doesn't go up.
You said it doesn't go down.
It's
Do you have my
stuck.
phone?
It came off the track.
Speaking of that,
I'm not sure. This is not
what
an
did
Apple.
It's an iPhone.
Sure.
It is an iPhone.
Indicate? Nama was missing. No.
Yes.
Marble.
When I try to go-
Does anybody have a phone? It's not theirs.
Do I have a phone? Is this,
No,
whose phone you're looking at? Your own?
mine.
So where's yours, Erwin? Oh, so then this is yours.
This is not mine.
It's not yours?
That's not mine.
Okay.
All right, everyone.
Oh, is that mine? Is this yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Please.
yours.
Yeah.
Erwin. Where's Erwin?
One of you three guys have his phone.
Erwin,
Your stuff.
Here's
No,
mine.
that's not
I'm trying
mine.
to figure
Not
out
mine.
why did mine work and why did your work and why did mine work?
I can't go.
Should have.